Welcome back to the Universalis podcast. I am Martin Kochański, the creator of Universalis, and in this episode I'll be looking at the highlights of the week ahead, starting with Sunday, the 31st of August. A couple of weeks ago I was talking about catechesis. I'm trying to think a lot about the subject nowadays because the Archdiocese of Southwark have kindly asked me to talk to their catechists on the 20th of September. Catechesis has many branches. It covers adults and children, but just to fix our ideas, I'll focus on those who are sort of both at once, the teenagers who are being prepared for confirmation. This makes sense because religion is about life, and life is what you do when you are an adult. And when you are a teenager, an adult is what you are in the process of becoming. Now, the arc along which most of our lives travel is this. At school you do and think because you are told to do and told to think. After school no one tells you any more. For many of us this means a period of chaos. It may last for years. You find that you need to think or do for yourself because no one is telling you any more. In the worst case you go herring after people who will tell you whether or not what they tell you is good or true. And then in the end you begin to get back. And that getting back is when you start becoming yourself properly. Old-fashioned people used to say, he is making his soul. That is when the remnants of what you learned in your confirmation class start to come back to you. The buried seeds sown by your teachers are brought to the surface and begin to sprout. All this means that anyone who's teaching adolescents for confirmation faces a difficulty. You can't tell when you've done it or whether you've done it at all well. It isn't like training young mathematicians to pass maths exams and go off to university to become university mathematicians. Those you can measure at every step. With confirmation you just don't know. You have to trust the seed and trust the Spirit who will look after the seed and call it into growth when it is time. This is where the creed in slow motion comes in. When I was asked in a hurry to give a title to my Southwark talk, I said, what about "The Creed is our bones"? And as so often when we're caught off balance and say the first thing that comes into our mind, the more I think about it, the more right it seems. Bones, after all, are what you don't see, but when the time comes for your soul to fill out and put on a bit of muscle, the bones are what will give it its shape. The first thing about the Creed is that in a straightforward legalistic sense it defines what it means to be a Christian. No moral judgment is intended here, just if you believe it, you are one. If you don't believe it, you aren't. The clarity is refreshing and reassuring. We can learn something more about the Creed through its timing. The Council of Nicaea, which laid down the Nicene Creed, was held 1700 years ago this year, just 12 years after Christianity had been made legal throughout the Roman Empire. The Creed, then, was practically the first thing that people got down to doing once they felt safe. But the Church wasn't new by then. She was almost 300 years old, and ever since the resurrection she had had experience of what people naturally understand about Christianity and what they need to be told and made to remember because otherwise they might misunderstand and misrepresent it. In that sense you could say that heresy defines the Creed, because it is precisely the misunderstood and misrepresented truths that we have to get right. If everybody agreed about a particular point and nobody ever got it wrong, there would be no point in mentioning it. We do not stand up at Mass every Sunday and say, I believe that water is wet. The Creed is a catalogue of mistakes that you might make but shouldn't. So now, looking at confirmation, what could possibly be a better thing for a group of people who are about to go off into the world than an immunization against all the mistakes they might possibly make? When I was talking about the Creed 2 weeks ago, I illustrated the principle of the Creed in slow motion by unpacking the first words of the Creed, I believe in God. At least beginning to unpack, because in the book each of these words takes a whole chapter. Believing in really does matter. For instance, if you come across a turbulent teenager who is a trouble to himself and his parents, the statement "I believe in you" means a lot more than "I believe that you exist." Said sincerely, looking into someone's eyes, "I believe in you" can save lives. And so "I believe in God" means a lot more than simply "I believe that God exists." Of course, in that podcast 2 weeks ago, I had to mention the word "I" as well, because some years ago there was a well-meaning attempt to abolish the creed by replacing "I" with "we." The thing about "we" is that nobody can ever say it truly. I mean, I can say "I believe" because I am inside my head and I know what it is thinking. I cannot say what you think, you standing next to me in church. So if I say "we believe," it means nothing at all. It isn't even a lie. I have simply no way of saying whether the words are true or false. You might as well not say them. I got an email after that. People do write in after the podcasts, and it's always good because it shows that they are listening and my voice isn't just a vague, holy drone in the background. It's hard work, this podcasting. So, someone listened and someone wrote in, and he made exactly the same points that I remember a bishop making in a radio interview with a friend of mine in the times when "I believe" was forbidden to be said in an English-speaking church. He told me that the Nicene bishops said "we." Pythomen, not Pytho, they said. Yes, of course, they did that because they were defining. They were using their collective authority to define, to decree, you might almost say to legislate. The bishop's "we" was "we, the church, officially." Each Sunday, your "I" and my "I" are us signing up to that definition of the church. That is why you and I, as individuals, have to say "I believe." The next step for the bishop and for my latest correspondent was to invoke the word community. When the word community comes up, I generally fall asleep. It's safer that way for everyone. Look at it. A community is not human in any sense. It has no mind, no heart, no soul, and it has more arms and legs than it is decent for any living being to possess. A community can't look forward to seeing God face to face because it has many faces, which is to say, no face at all. God cannot call it by name because only people have names. There's no point in carrying on an argument with someone I haven't met and can't see, but I wanted to mention this because it says something about the creed. Both of us are arguing, but we are on the same side, not opposite ones. We are both standing on the creed. We agree that the things it finds important are important, important enough to be in the creed, and important enough for us to argue about. The creed also gives us clear words to focus that argument. We probably won't ever meet, but if we did, we wouldn't be arguing by shouting from mountaintop to mountaintop with loudhailers. We would be standing on the same firm foundation of the creed. And this inevitably turns out to be not nose to nose, but side by side, shoulder to shoulder, as we look into the law and the prophets and the gospel and the creed, seeking truth and understanding. This, too, is a reason why the creed is good at the confirmation kind of age. When you engage with the creed, you discover what it is exactly that you are committing yourself to when you stand up and say it in church. But also, if, as time goes on and life goes on, you drift sadly into disbelief, it is something if at least you have a proper idea precisely what it is that you disbelieve. Surprisingly often, what makes you uncomfortable is the myths and decorations of Christianity, not the creed at its core. Someone sent me a fine example of this, and I'll mention it later on. First of all, let's have a couple of saints. On Wednesday the 3rd, we celebrate Pope St. Gregory the Great. I didn't know much about him when I wrote the podcast about him last year, but I learned a lot. Rome, the greatest city in Europe, was sacked by Alaric the Goth in 410 AD. In the next century and a half, Rome was threatened by Attila the Hun, but saved by Pope Leo the Great. She changed from capital of the Western Roman Empire to the capital of the Ostrogoth Kingdom of Italy. Then the Eastern Roman Empire under Constantinople took back control, but Italy was too far away for it to last. Rome was besieged, sacked, occupied, liberated, besieged, saved. The cast included Goths, and more Goths, and Franks and Lombards. Rome was still there, but more and more the countryside was devastated. Italy as a whole produced a quarter of the amount of food it used to, and grain fleets no longer sailed in from Alexandria. People abandoned the land and the outlying unprotected towns. Richer people emigrated to the east. Refugees flooded into Rome. Gregory was born in around 540 to an important noble family. He was the grandson of a pope. He proved himself an able administrator and rose to be prefect of Rome, which was the highest post in the city. Then he retired to a monastic community he had founded in his family mansion. This was not unusual among the Roman aristocracy of the time, a good, complete, well-shaped career. But he couldn't escape the troubles of the world that easily. He was needed because there were not that many educated men left. In 579 the Pope sent Gregory to Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. He asked for help for Italy, but no help was forthcoming because Constantinople had serious troubles of its own. Still, in his 7 years' stay there, Gregory watched how whole nations were administered, and he learned to navigate the waters of international diplomacy. When Gregory came back to Rome, he knew that Constantinople was too far away to help. So instead he conceived a plan to convert the northern part of Europe into a new unity under Rome, a unity of the Church. Gregory was elected Pope on the 3rd of September 590. We celebrate his feast on that day, not on the day of his death, because he died in Lent, and nowadays we like to keep Lent Lenten. Rome was still there, but Rome was dying. A great city is a complex organism, and it needs constant maintenance. Imagine your own hometown if water stopped coming out of the taps. All the aqueducts which used to bring water to the city, from 50 miles away some of them, had been cut in all those years of war. Only one survived, so the only habitable houses in the city were the ones connected to it. The damaged waterworks leaked and created marshland even within the city. Where there is marsh, there are mosquitoes, and where there are mosquitoes, there is malaria. Gregory suffered from a low fever for most of his life. And then again, when the river Tiber flooded, as it often does, it broke through the broken walls of Rome and drowned the granaries in which the grain for the city was stored. People were near starvation. Gregory devoted the whole of the church's resources to saving the population. It was all meticulously administered. Lists were made of everyone who needed help, of all ages and stations in life and of both sexes. Money from the church's revenues was distributed 4 times a year, at Easter, the feast of St. Peter and Paul, the anniversary of Gregory's election in September, and St. Andrew's Day. The very poor received a share of the revenues which the church received in kind. According to season, they included corn, wine, cheese, vegetables, bacon, meat, fish, and oil. The state as an entity capable of being any use to anyone had ended. Rulers would come and go, invaders would come and go, but none of them could set up any kind of functioning structure. Only the church could. Gregory set up an administration which would keep going no matter what, because it was in the church's hands. He supervised every aspect of it. Cheating tax collectors in Sicily would be dismissed or disciplined. Quarrelling nuns in Sardinia would have their grievances heard. Corrupt judges were purged. Law and justice were kept safe. Thanks to Gregory, structure, organization, life had a chance of surviving through the dark age which was coming. and they did survive. I don't know what sort of mental picture you have of your bishop, but I bet it won't be like Gregory. It won't be like Ambrose either, 200 years earlier, who was forced by the crowds to become Bishop of Milan even though he hadn't been baptized yet. When was the last time you heard of a bishop being selected by riot? The quick answer to this observation is these people are saints. They were exceptional even by the standards of their time. That's why their contemporaries aren't saints, and they are. But let's go beyond that just a little bit, because I heard a story a few months ago about one particular bishop and his secret activities. It was the early 1980s. The bishop seemed a normal bishop doing normal bishopish things, but now and then he would disappear for a bit. No one knew where he went. For the most part, no one knew that he had gone at all, because the secret was very well kept. I heard this story from someone who was a very new priest at the time. He happened to see the bishop walking past disguised as an ordinary cleric and was told, "Follow me." A little bit of history here. In about the summer of 1976, a new disease appeared in the world. It was called AIDS. Actually, it wasn't itself a disease. It was something that made you catch diseases. What was happening was that ordinary, fit, healthy people were being struck by vicious, rare diseases which had hitherto only affected the old and the very, very decrepit. People got attacked by several of these diseases at once, and they died horribly. No one could save them. Nobody knew what it was. Was it chemically induced? Was it contagious? Was it infectious? Nobody knew. Hospitals were not always good to these patients. The medical profession tries not to be embarrassed by failure, but sometimes it can't help itself. There were even reports in the papers of doctors breaching the Hippocratic Oath and refusing to treat patients because "I am too important to die." Where this secret disappearing bishop was disappearing to was the AIDS ward in the local hospital, and he wasn't there to fling a few blessings around and sprinkle some holy water. Dressed in the full protective gear everyone was wearing in those days, because no one knew what this disease was, he was cleaning bedpans. Now I remember St. Charles Borromeo and the bubonic plague. When plague came, he prepared himself for death, made his will, and went to the hospital where the worst cases were. You can see why all this had to be kept a dead secret. You couldn't have journalists and photographers turning real life, a real encounter with the suffering Christ, into a public performance. Only in secret could this good be done. The good you do in secret, your Father knows in secret. Only in secret are you free to look Christ in the eye and perform the most demeaning services for him, not because you're doing it for the sake of your reputation, but because he is Christ and your brother. My informant was sworn to secrecy. 42 years later, if I've told it right, the secret is still a secret. But to you and me, the lesson is, there is a lot done that we never know about. A bishop is like an iceberg. 90% of him is underwater, and we don't see it. Friday the 5th brings another big city, Calcutta this time, and another saint who looked people in the eye. Mother Teresa was born in 1910 to an Albanian family in what is now allowed to be called the Republic of North Macedonia. She left home at the age of 18 and joined the Sisters of Loreto in Ireland, where she was named Sister Mary Teresa after St. Thérèse of Lisieux. In 1931 she was assigned to the Order's Calcutta house and taught at their school there, where she eventually became headmistress. Like Gregory, you could see where the rest of her career was going to go. A longer or shorter period of service, and then an honoured retirement. Quite possibly a long one. One nun headmistress I knew was over 100 when she died. Teresa received a new vocation to help the poor and destitute. In 1948 she was the same age Gregory was when he was sent from Rome to Constantinople. Teresa left the convent and took up a new life caring for the poor wherever they might be, lying sick in the street or even dying in dustbins. She had heard the message that disappearing bishop had heard, that people don't hear when they make lists of the sick, the poor, the dying, and campaign safely on their behalf. The message is simply this: at least look me in the eye. She looked them in the eye. One by one, some of her former pupils joined her, and the new congregation of the Missionaries of Charity was established in the Diocese of Calcutta in 1950. It spread across India and eventually onto every continent. Mother Teresa died on the 5th of September 1997. Mother Teresa is a strong candidate for being the best-hated saint. She embarrasses all of us, of course, because she didn't do anything that most of us, physically, can't do as well. Better, indeed, because by every worldly measure, all of us are in a better position than she was. We were not born in poverty in a remote corner of the Balkans, and yet we don't achieve what she did. We are in a position to turn our embarrassment to our good. We aren't called to be Saint Teresa of Calcutta, but we are called to be Saint Me, and we can spend our life finding out who that is. Napoleon used to say that each of his soldiers carried a marshal's baton in his knapsack. Perhaps we each carry a saint's crown in ours. At the very least, with God's grace, embarrassment at Mother Teresa's career can give us the impetus we need to do better with all that we have been given. We want to be able to smile the way she does. There are people whose reaction to Mother Teresa is not embarrassment but hatred. It is passionate, focused hatred. I suspect myself that it has something to do with the fact that Mother Teresa was a woman, therefore oppressed, an Albanian, therefore ignorant, and a nun, therefore a loser. They want to bend down and pat her on the head while she looks soulfully up at them like a spaniel that knows its place. But they can't. She was 4'11", and they may be 6 foot or more, so hold still while I patronize you, they say, but it doesn't work. She smiles down at them with that marvellous smile of hers, and they can't stand it. Hence the hate. They will have more saints to hate next week, when on Sunday the 7th, Pier Giorgio Frassati and Carlo Acutis will be canonized, a young man and a boy. I think it was Saint Therese of Lisieux who said that when she died, her busy time would be only just beginning. I expect these two are thinking something like that just now. I promise you a little more about the Creed. I'll be very quick about it. Someone wrote to me suggesting that the podcast should have a sequence about apologetics one day. We'll see about that, but one of the misunderstandings he mentioned that people have about the faith is the idea that we believe that God is this relentless judge who, if people have been badder than they have been good, sends them to hell. There are plenty of counter-arguments, of course. There's the picture of God not as an accountant, but as a doctor, delivering a diagnosis. Given all that your life has been, here is who you have become. There is the brute fact in the Gospel of the only person of whose presence in heaven we can be absolutely sure is the dying thief on the cross next to Jesus, a robber and a murderer. There is spirituality through the ages, which maintains that hell is a logical consequence of what, deep down, you really and truly want. Suppose your besetting sin was envy, and you have let it become part of you, so that it can't be removed the way a doctor removes a wart. What then? What if you are thrown into a world where everyone is full of joy and love, and the happiness of other people makes them happy, not sad and angry like you? In that case, wouldn't the light of heaven be the flames of hell? You can see now where this is leading. In the Creed it says, "He will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead." When you are arguing with your friends about what judgment is all about, that part of the Creed is where you should all be standing. I talked quite a bit about the Rosary 2 weeks ago. Now I have something more to mention. Thanks to the kindness of friends, the Litany of Loreto has been added to the Rosary page in the Universalis mobile apps. So now, when you press the play button, at the end of the 5 decades, this is what you hear.
Pater de celis Deus,
miserere nobis,
Filii Redemptor mundi Deus,
miserere nobis,
Spiritus Sancte Deus,
miserere nobis,
Sancta Trinitas Unus Deus,
miserere nobis,
Sancta Maria,
ora pro nobis,
Sancta Dei Genitrix,
ora pro nobis.
That's all for this week. If you'd like to write to us about anything, send an email to universalis@universalis.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Have a good week in every sense, and let's pray for one another.